Guys. I find myself recording this podcast again on a Monday because I had technical difficulties again on Friday with my audio. There was none. I thought you might want audio on an audio format. And those of you who see it on Facebook, you probably didn't want to see me and try to read my lips. So here we go again on a Monday morning. I reserve the right to have a sip of my coffee as I do this. We're going to be talking about your personal brand today. My name is Lisa Edwards. I am my mother used to call it the chief cook and bottle washer of the exclusive career. I am here for you. I have two podcasts. This one is focused on executive competencies, leadership development, emotional intelligence, all those kinds of things that get you into the C-suite. My other podcast, The Exclusive Career Coach, is focused on job search strategies, all the things around that. Last week's episode of The Exclusive Career Coach, which was 300 and I didn't put it down here, 371, I don't know. Anyway, it was called Cover Letters in 2026. Do we need them? So if you have that question and are wondering what an expert answer is, have a listen. This week, I'm talking about, as I said, your personal brand. And this is an update of an episode I did on the other podcast back in episode 15. So, back in the day, that podcast was covering all things, including career management, and this topic about branding, which is important when you are in the job search and trying to formulate your resume strategy, your LinkedIn strategy. How am I going to introduce myself? That also holds true throughout your career. And I'm not intending today to help you come up with a completed, articulated brand statement. That is not the goal. My goal is twofold. One, I want to convince you, hopefully, of the importance of it, what it does for you, and how you can leverage it once you have it. And also get you thinking about what is involved in developing your own personal brand. I have worked with hundreds, if not, I think I'm in the thousands now, of clients with this. When I do resume writing with my clients, we have two 1 hour Zoom calls. The first call is focused on their experience. So I fill in the gaps with their existing resume and their LinkedIn profile. What do I still need to know to write them a world-class resume? What do I not see? What do I not know in enough detail? The second session is focused on their personal brand. I have them do an exercise ahead of time that they send to me. And then I also ask questions that really go at the personal brand kind of from 360 degrees. I look at it from many different angles because what one client will tell me that is my like aha for them that really makes all of the tumblers fall into place will be different for the next client. So in other words, the same one or two questions is not going to do it. I have to come at it from different angles, dig deeper, excavate. I've been using that word a lot lately because I love it to figure out, okay, for this client, where's the gold that I'm mining for. I promised I would talk about why personal branding is important. There is tremendous value in other people knowing what they get when they get you. And I'm going to give you some examples that I think will bring this to light for you. I want you to think of well-known brands. I'm going to give you a few here. And I'm pretty sure you're going to have an immediate association or reaction to them. One of them is more, I don't know, I'm being maybe a little sexist, but I think it's more for the women than the men. We have Nike. You have an immediate thought about Nike. Starbucks, again, could be positive, could be negative. I came up initially with Hermes and then I changed it to Chanel because I thought the guys might be able to relate a little bit more to Chanel. Take your pick. Hermes, Chanel. I've been obsessed lately with looking at bags online. Not that I'm going to buy one, of course. Whoa. But I'm fascinated by the marketing of them, the value that is placed on them, etc. All right, couple more examples. iPhone and McDonald's. Again, good or bad association, you probably had a fairly immediate one. And it's no different than your personal brand. You want to be the person defining what you are known as, because if not, others will define it for you, or you won't have a personal brand. And I always equate that. We've just talked about some name brands. I equate the lack of a personal brand to being the generic. And if you are thinking of a job search, the generic candidate is the one that gets hired when, hey, we don't really have any great candidates. We can't afford to pay top dollar. So we've got this, okay candidate, the generic brand, let's go for it. You don't want to be that person, and I don't think that you are. Now, I want to give you some examples of some me and some fictitious people to just get you thinking. So mine is, and this is what I came up with. I've also got some AI help that I'm going to share with you in a moment. Mine is excellence with professionalism. I have here again, these are fictitious folks. I just sort of thought about the people I've worked with and sort of created fictitious personal brands. So we have Frank. Frank is the person you bring in when people can't come to consensus. Now, you would create something catchier about that, but he's the person. So that's how Frank is known. And Frank loves being that person you bring in when you can't get something done, can't agree. Joy, you want her in the room when creativity and innovation are needed. Now, think about that one. If Joy works in a law firm, a doctor's office, a banking, an old banking firm, creativity and innovation would be a unique attribute. If Joy works in public relations, advertising, that PR, those kinds of things, Joy probably wouldn't stand out as much with her creativity and innovation because the room would be filled with creativity and innovation. Ben is the complex problem excavator. I like that word, like I said, and solver. So when there is a complex problem, can't figure out what's really going on, he gets in there, dig, 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 solves the problem. And then finally, I have Liz. She will fix the stickiest of client relationships. I've actually worked with several people who have had a history in their career of being brought in to fail in client relations. They're threatening to walk away, or they already have walked away. She can bring them back in the fold, and this client can bring them back into the fold, and typically does so with increased revenue from that client. Now, what else? In addition to others knowing your brand, when you understand your own brand, it can be extremely helpful in both the micro and the macro career decisions that you make. What do I mean by that? Micro decisions would be, should I take this project on? Is this going to advance my brand? Does my brand kind of mesh with this project? There is a project I'm being asked to lead. There's a volunteer opportunity. And then at the macro level, should I go for this promotion? Should I seek this external role? Does it match with my brand? Will it leverage my brand? Will it advance my brand? Your personal brand can be an extremely helpful lens through which to view, again, micro and macro opportunities. I want to give you some other benefits of having a clearly defined personal brand. If you are in a job search, you want your candidacy to be based on value rather than pricing. You want to be seen as the premium product. Remember, I used the example of a generic a moment ago. You want to be the name brand product that commands the highest price, and people are willing to pay it because they don't want generic. The good companies, the great companies, they don't want the generic option. Here's another one. You become a target for other employers. So, in addition to being that premium brand in the hiring process, they are seeking you out because they know you are the one that can fix the kind of problem that they are facing right now. Here's another one. When you leave a company, you can't take your job title with you. That belongs with the company, but you can take your personal brand. And tied closely into that one is the next one. A personal brand makes it easier for you to pivot jobs. So think about this. If you are known as the person who can excavate complex problems, figure out a path forward, get the team moving in the right direction, and solve that problem, what company doesn't need that? What job function doesn't need that? Makes it much easier for you to pivot either jobs or industries. So a job pivot is I was an accountant, now I'm going to be an ops person. Industry is I used to work in CPG, now I'm going to go to manufacturing. And finally, thought leadership often accompanies a strong personal brand. You want to factor in your personal brand as you contribute thought leadership both inside and outside of your company. You want to have more influence, be more well known, all of that. And that really starts with, okay, what am I about? Perfect example, myself. I am known as an expert in the job search, resume, and all the things that go with that. So, resume writing, interviewing, salary negotiations, creating your job search strategy, enter, networking, all of those things. And also in how to leverage your skills, strengthen your skills, and strengthen your personal brand to get you into the C suite. I don't need to be out there, nor will you see me out there doing articles on, I don't know, dogs. As passionate as I am about dogs, that's not part of my personal brand. So I try everything that I put in my newsletter, everything that I put in my videos, my podcast, speak to those areas of expertise that I have. It doesn't do me any good, and it is confusing to my audience if I go off in left field to talk about something else. As promised, cup of coffee. Next, I want to talk about how you develop a personal brand. And again, not trying to create yours today. There's a lot of work involved in that, but to get you thinking. You are not expected to have a personal brand right out of college unless you have done something very extraordinary, had amazing internship experiences, part-time job, I don't know, something like that. But hopefully there's like a grain of it there, but not a fully developed one. But as you get more experience, which is who I'm talking to, of course, on this podcast, you should. The problem is, it's very hard for you to read the label of the bottle that you're in. What do I mean by that? That's an expression that we coaches use when we talk about how difficult it is for us to see ourselves objectively as that brand, as that product that we are trying to sell, which is essentially what we're doing throughout our career. I am as guilty of this as anyone. So just because I am a career coach, just because I have a pretty massive amount of tools at my disposal, I regularly face issues with my business, with my mindset, with, I don't know, messaging of what I do, where I seek other experts out because I'm in that bottle. I don't have that perspective. This is when, and this is why a career coach is so helpful. And there are within the world of career coaches, and I'm not one, so I'm not selling myself here. I have a lot of experience with personal branding, but there are folks who have certification in personal branding. The organization that I got both of my resume credentials from actually have a certified personal branding specialist credential that I would love to do at some point. So there are people who specialize in this. I want you to think about this analogy when you think about branding and kind of specificity. If you went to a car dealership and you asked a salesperson about a specific vehicle, that one over there looks interesting to me. Tell me about it. Would you want that car salesman to tell you about it has four tires, it has an engine and a steering wheel? No. You would want to know about, if you want to know about the tires, you'd want to know, are they really great tires? What are they I think I have hydrogen tires on my car. How responsive is this steering wheel? But you also might want to know about safety features, the sound system, the nav system, the warranty. You want specifics, right? The equivalent of brand you is to tell me that you're a hard worker, which is like I have a steering wheel, an engine, I don't know, I have some tires, and you have X number of years of experience. I don't know, I have an engine. You are not differentiating yourself. You're boring the person you're telling them to. You want to talk about this. Tell me about your record of turning around underperforming sales departments and leveraging outsourcing to minimize costs and maximize productivity, your ability to conceptualize and produce strategic go-to-market plans based on thorough research and sound methodology, and your experience with quarterbacking strategic and innovative marketing and branding strategies for both B2B and B2C segments. So you see how specific that is and how differentiating that is. Next, I want to talk about how you leverage this personal brand. So once you have it, what are some obvious and less obvious ways to utilize that brand? We've talked about the resume, so it's definitely at the top of the resume and also in the LinkedIn, primarily in your about section, but it could also be in your headline. You want to use this to develop your elevator pitch. And when I work with clients on elevator pitches, we look at various scenarios because the way you speak, as the way you present your elevator pitch for, oh, you're trying to, make an initial contact with someone who might be in a position to hire you is going to be a bit different from I'm going to meet somebody at a conference that I might want to, I don't know, do some sort of collaboration with. But you do need kind of the initial scaffolding of your elevator pitch that you can then customize. Also, how do you introduce yourself in those networking settings? There you go. You also want to use it to identify the best strategy to extend your thought leadership. And I talked about this earlier on. You want to do that both within. So, how can I be known as a thought leader within my current organization? And then, what is the best tool to move it beyond the walls of my current employer? And for most of you, that's going to be LinkedIn. I've worked with many clients on a very specific plan to be known as a subject matter expert, thought leader, whatever's appropriate for them on LinkedIn. Next, I want to talk about how do you identify your personal brand. I have some great questions. And this is definitely a section where you might want to go to the show notes, re-listen to this when you can make some notes. If you happen to be driving, don't try to write these down while you're driving. So, how do I identify my personal brand? As I mentioned, getting the help of someone like me, a career coach, someone who specializes in personal branding is a great way to go. And I think I made this clear, but just to reiterate, on the resume, this experience, this information would go above the experience section. So you've got your heading up at the top. You've got usually kind of at the halfway point of the first page, your professional experience starts. So somewhere above the fold on page one is your branding. Here are the questions to ask yourself. What do I do differently and better than others in my field? And then a follow-up question there is how do I do it differently and better? And this is your secret sauce. Whenever I ask this question for clients, they kind of have to think a while, but then it becomes pretty clear to them, well, this is how I approach sales that I don't see anybody else doing. This is how I approach marketing. And so they start to see this thing that they've sort of taken for granted and haven't really thought much about. It's just what they do is actually very unique. So, what do I do differently and better than others in my field? And how do I do it that is different and better, which I call your secret sauce? Next question. What do I dislike about how others in my profession go about this work, and what is my solution? So that could be very closely related to the previous question, or it could be something completely different. But I see others doing this. A perfect example in my world, what I dislike is the low end folks who shoot their client a lengthy questionnaire. There's little to no human contact with them, and all they do is just sort of regurgitate what the clients come up with, and they don't have any, at that level, they don't have any genius of their own to add into the process to really elevate that to the next level. I dislike that tremendously. And I hate that there are people online that are offering that for two and three, $400. And I've been the recipient of many of those people after they've spent that money, which of course I can't credit them for that spent expense, but they come to me because they're no better off and in some cases worse off than they were before. So what is it that you dislike about how others in your profession do what you do? And what is your solution? Next question. What feedback do I consistently receive about my strengths? What do others say about me? So I've gotten a promotion, I've gotten a great, a big sale came through. It was my annual performance review. What are people saying? Next, here are three questions to ask others to help determine your brand. And to be clear, you want to ask people who know you fairly well. It's not going to be super useful if they have only a passing acquaintance with you. What do I do better than anyone else you know? If you had to compare me to a model of car or a type of appliance, a breed of dog, choose whatever you want to go for. What type of car would I be and why? What type of appliance would I be? The why is extremely important there. And this is actually part of some personal branding training that I did go through years ago. And this question really stuck with me because you want to ask the why question because someone could say, two people could say, oh, you're like a truck. But one could be, if you don't ask the why question, one could be saying, well, it's because you have a heavy capacity, you could go over rough terrain and you keep going, that kind of thing. Whereas someone else might be able to talk about, I don't know, something completely different about that truck, and yet they both gave the answer of a truck. One more question. What three adjectives best describe me? And when you ask enough people, you'll start to see some threads with that adjective question. Here are some examples. I want to iterate that many people think of a personal brand as being a single label, like the tech guy. And I gave you, to be clear, some of my examples, the person who fixes the complex problems and you bring them in when the client has threatened to leave. Those are pretty one dimensional, and that's okay. Many people have a what I call a constellation of attributes, and that's my brand. And so I'm going to give you that example. For me, I'm one of 23 master resume writers in the world. So when you're looking for the right person, whatever that is, well, okay, I'm in a group of 23, so you've narrowed down everybody else in the world except for 22 other people. I have a master's degree. Okay, so I'm sure some of those people don't have a master's degree. Okay, so the group is even smaller. And I have a certification in coaching and a certification in job search. So we've got a pretty small pool to begin with. And in addition, the North Star of my constellation is I am incisive yet accessible. In other words, I have the brain of a strategist and the humor of a friend. And that's my secret sauce that builds immediate trust. And I gave myself the title. I am a highly intelligent career architect with incisiveness, humor, and heart. So think about that. Think about that showing up on your LinkedIn profile in some form. Please don't misunderstand that I am saying that quote has to go everywhere. But the concept of being a highly intelligent career architect with incisiveness, humor, and heart. Think about how that differentiates me from the folks out there. You have that same capacity. I've got some examples of people that you probably are familiar with. And the first one is James Clear. He's the atomic habit expert. We called him, and AI gave me some help on these. James Clear is the scientific truth teller. And his brand gives kind of the concept that a brand can be built on a delivery framework just as much as a personality. So for some of you, it could be about how you make things so efficient, how you save so much money, that delivery framework. Here's another one. Tim Ferriss, he's the 4 Hour Workweek guy. His constellation of attributes is he's a tech investor, a human guinea pig, and a world-class deconstructor. So we called him the human optimizer. And his differentiation is that it's not just about business advice, it's about deconstructing excellence. What is it about this individual's success or this company's success, this product's success that we can learn from? So he is an elite level interviewer. He's a minimalist. He's someone who is brutally honest about his own experiments and his own failures. Next one, I have Marie Forleo, and we called her the strategic encourager. Her constellation is she's a business strategist, plus a hip hop dancer, plus everything is figure outable philosopher. And she created a massive brand, Marie TV, by being a thought leader for the next generation. So obviously, there's lots of business strategists out there. There's probably a lot of people that are saying everything is figure outable. But then she brings in the hip hop, not because it makes her better at the other two things, but it does differentiate her. And I wanted to give you one of my personal favorites. So I wanted to get someone who was really in corporate world. And I asked AI, come on, give me some examples. And I've just recently listened to a podcast series about Microsoft. And Satya Nadella is the CEO of Microsoft. So he was figured heavily in there. When he took over Microsoft, it was known for being aggressive and stuffy. And he used his personal brand. I want you to think about that. He used his own personal brand to perform one of the greatest cultural turnarounds in history. I think we could easily substitute Jack Welch for this story. His constellation is tech brilliance. This is Satya. Tech brilliance plus radical empathy plus growth mindset. And his differentiation was he was able to replace the know it all culture at Microsoft to one of a learn it all culture. So he built a brand, his own personal brand, and subsequently Microsoft's around intellectual humility. And his lesson is that he shows you can be the most powerful person in the room and also lead with soft attributes like empathy. He doesn't have to lead, and great CEOs, great leaders don't have to lead with an iron fist. In fact, I would argue that you shouldn't. And his brand made a massive cold corporation, Microsoft, feel human and innovative again. As I wrap this one up, I want you to remember that my goal was not to give you a step by step to building your own personal brand, but rather to get you thinking about the benefits of doing so and hopefully maybe inspire you into thinking about this a little bit more, maybe even reaching out to someone like me to help you to develop that because it really is a critical piece to get you to the highest levels if that is your aspiration. I hope this has been helpful. I will see you back here in 2 weeks. And if you would like some job search assistance, head over